Hey, this is Dave with Taboo Customs, and we're here under another Chevy truck. This one is a 2011 Chevy extended cab, and we're going to be doing some rust repair today. So let's take a look at what we're going to be repairing. Today we're working on a 2011 Chevy 1500 with some rust issues. It's got issues with the area right around this center cross member, which is the one just behind. There's two cross members here in the center of the vehicle. One holds transmission and then one just behind that. The area between the center cross member and the transmission cross member is needing a kit. This area behind the center cross member back to about the first fuel tank cross member is needing a kit. And then also we're going to need to replace that rear fuel tank cross member. So depending on which one you're here for, if you need to see the others, be sure to check out the description on this video, and I will link all the other two videos for that to each one. But we are going to do these in separate videos, so let's get to it. All right, taking a little bit closer look at the area that we are working with on this 2011 Chevy extended cab is here on the right. We have the cross member that the transmission is actually mounted to, and then we will be working and installing a kit from Taboo Customs in this area between transmission cross member and then this next cross member back here, which in this truck is not really nothing is mounted to it, so it's really just for structure of the frame. But we'll have to go in, and you can see on the driver's side here we've got a what looks to be an ABS brake controller here that we'll have to remove, plus the bracket to go in there and deal with some of these fuel lines. Now if you look at the inside of the frame, inside here is not terrible. I mean, it's starting to flake. I don't see any holes in the inside the frame, which is good. But now we start looking down here at the bottom, you can see they had some small holes here, and they, you know, and this like flakiness here, if I take a hammer and start tapping on that, I guarantee that all that stuff here will break up, and this is going to be a pretty large hole, because this is pretty common what you see in rusted frames. And of course we get to the outside, you can see definitely what we're kind of seeing now in that the bottom portion of this frame here is pretty much starting to rust away. So we'll go in and put this kit in, and this kit will, on the outside and the bottom, cover more than between the cross members. The inside, you really can only go from cross member to cross member. It'll overlap into the on this outside more, and it'll actually go over past this body mount, and you can see our other kit we've already installed over here and actually overlap into that other kit, because we like to overlap the kits to ensure we get good strength and good you know, strength between the two kits in those joint areas. So right now what we need to do is start doing some disassembly, and then we can get to cleaning up. First thing on this driver's side is going to be removing this ABS controller. Now to do that, first thing we did was they actually removed the connector here, which isn't too difficult. There is a red clip down here that you have to pry out to release the little lever here. Push down on this, and then you can pull back on that lever and then work it out. Then, using a 10mm wrench, loosen up these two nuts here in the back. Once they're loose, you can pry this up and out of these slots, and there's a little stud that sticks down into this right here. So then once you do that, it'll kind of be there, but of course you have the brake lines there that are going to hold it up. You could remove the brake lines if you want. Of course that might be best, but then you are going to have to re-bleed pretty much every both brake systems at that point. So we actually do this, we try to leave this all connected. To do that, what we then do is we'll pop these out of the top of the frame to give us a little bit more room to move that around. And it'll also go in here, pop these clips loose up here that hold all the brake lines on the top, and we'll do that for the next couple of holders this way and back towards the rear of the truck, just so we can get enough to get it up and out of the way. And now that it's up and out of the way, we can go ahead and start removing these nuts here. Now a lot of times these nuts will be pretty rusted, so we will spend usually, if we can, try to get some penetrating oil or something on those for a couple of days prior to this. So let's start working on those. Some tips for removing this bracket here. You do not loosen these nuts on the inside of the frame. Those are actually welded to this bracket. There'll be holes on the outside of the frame. 13mm socket for those bolts. However, like in our case, this bottom bolt was actually rusted to the point to where we couldn't fit. 13mm socket did not fit on it. We were able to shove a 12mm socket on there and get it to turn a little bit, at least enough to where we were able to knock it over. But as you can see, now that we've got that out, what didn't look too bad on the inside now is actually a big hole. And you don't have to take these bolts out, just loosen them you know, halfway from what they were, and then there are slots and it'll slide forward and pop out of the hole that's right here, so you don't have to actually lose that bolt in the frame. So remember to do that. So all right, now we will work on getting these fuel lines out of the way and start cleaning up. As for the fuel lines, some tips. These, you just have to pry out on this, and you're able to then pop the fuel lines out, but then you'll still have to pry this little piece out that holds the fuel lines. You could leave it on here. It might be easier to remove it though. There's another one right here you'll have to do the same thing with. Then up here, the fuel lines are actually stuck in this bracket here. You have to push in on the tab, able to pull the fuel lines down. Then there's some flex line up there at the front that allows you to have quite a bit of play with these fuel lines. This bracket then will go ahead and remove this bolt so that we can pull that bracket completely off. And we also did remove this connector here for one of the fuel line sensors. First thing we do is we use a needle scaler on the frame, and you can guys see how violent it is, and it starts to open up this hole much more than what it was. The inside didn't look too bad, but now it's actually a lot larger than it was on the outside. The issue we currently have is that there's still a lot of rust and scale to remove up in that little valley that is in the frame, and this controller is now really in the way of getting to do that. So we want to make sure we do the frame repair correct. So like I said before, it's a little bit of debate whether you remove this or not. You can go in there and weld it on without removing this, but if your frame is pretty bad and you need to go in there and you really do want to get all this scale off and try to get down to good metal everywhere, so you can try to convert it and keep this from further rusting out, we are going to go ahead and remove this because of all those issues. Up here, there's 4 lines. They feed the all the brakes. So those are 13mm. We definitely recommend using a line wrench to get those off. Up here on the front, the 2 probably feed lines, those are a little bit larger. Those are 15mm. So we'll pull those off and get that out of there so we can make sure we do a good repair here. Let's take a quick look at the kit now. This piece here is the inside piece. It is a 7-gauge piece, and the reason for that is that we've got this large cutout in the center that cause we have that depression in the frame where the fuel lines go back behind the ABS controller, and you can't really get around that. So we made this a thicker piece just to ensure we retain the strength. This piece here is actually the bottom, and then the outside, you can see how it'll go around the body mounts, and these will actually go around those body mounts at the very end to tie both sides together. Now that we've taken a look at that, what we're going to do is we're going to take these pieces, put them up on the frame, mark out the perimeter, and then we'll continue cleaning and cutting out some of the cancer on the frame. All right, the first piece we're going to put up here and mark out is going to be the inside piece. On the driver's side here, you're going to want to make sure you line up the holes and the slots, of course the depression, and then we're going to mark it out, the full perimeter of this piece with a piece of chalk. Don't have to worry about this bottom here because our new piece is going to weld into this section here. But this is basically going to be the rough areas that you're going to make sure that you get cleaned up so that we can get good welds in those areas. We're going to go ahead and also mark out the inside of this depression because we are going to want to weld in there too if we can. Now, once you get down here towards the bottom, it might be pretty difficult because this material is getting pretty close to where it's rusted out, so you'll have to really watch your weld settings and whatnot down there. So now that we've got this inside marked out, we'll move to the outside. All right, the outside and the bottom. Now, of course, you line up the slots here for the body mount. You will have a little bit of play back and forth. Now, the bottom of the frame in this area is angled. So you can see that you got this large piece here that'll actually have to be pushed up against the frame. You will have this piece up here at the front. You'll want to pre-bend that down just a little bit to make sure you get it to where you can push it up against the frame. So what we've got now is we've got it up against the frame. Then again, we're also going to mark it out. Perimeter, the bottom, back here by the body mount. And if you have our kit that goes behind this body mount for the rest of the center section of the vehicle, which is a good chance you do if you're fixing this area, this kit will overlap that kit so you can tie those two in together. Now, once you've got that, you can go down here. These holes here are meant for drainage. Now, the chances are you've got large holes in the bottom of the frame, and we're going to cut some of those out here in a moment because those are where there's some smaller holes in the bottom of the frame. They tend to rust out and make much larger holes. So we're actually going to use those holes that are now created for drain holes to try to make sure we keep the frame clean on the inside and prevent some of this issue with rusting. So now that we've got these marked out, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go in here, cut out some of this cancer, because our next goal is to get these lines cleaned up so that we can weld them, but then also clean up the rest of this and convert some of this rust over to good metal, get it primed, try to prevent this rust from coming back in this area. Now, for starting to cut out some of this material, really just want to focus on the areas that are really completely gone. In addition, we also want to try to open up a small area down here at the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to get in here, we're going to clean out the inside and bottom of this frame. We want to try to get all that material out of there if you can, because if you do not, moisture and everything will stay in that frame again and just continue to cause you further issues. And later down the line, even with these kits, you would have additional issues in 4 to 5 years or so. So anyway, we'll go in here, we're going to use a plasma cutter. You could use a hard wheel, a lot of different things. With the amount that we've actually got to cut out on this frame, we're going to go ahead and get the plasma cutter out. We're going to cut out on the inside a fair amount of this bottom section here in the middle, and then also a little bit here on the outside. You do need to be careful about how much you're going to be cutting out of this frame. We've got a lot of frame left up here at the top, which is really, going to hold the structure of this frame. If you're going to cut out a lot more than this, you might have to start to be worried about the structure of it and shoring it up before you do. But I mean, if you look at the piece that we cut out, really it was not holding much of anything at all. Now that we've got a hole, we're going to rake out all of the rust that was in there. And then we'll also go in, try to blow some air from the back, from the front, try to get as much debris out of the inside of the frame as possible. The next steps here that we're going to take are probably going to be the most important because it's really going to determine the quality of the welds you're going to get and essentially the longevity of your frame after you do this as well. We are going to go in and of course we've got our perimeter marked. We're going to take that down to bare metal. There cannot be any contamination, no rust. You're going to have some areas here where there may be a gray where, you know, we've peened it and, you know, it turns black, and that's because these frames were undercoated at one time, but a lot of that undercoating flaked off with this rust. Now if there's any of that left, you're going to need to take that off because it will melt quickly and run down into your welds, creating a lot of bad problems for you, and you do not want that. Then we're going to go in, clean up, like I said, the perimeter down to bare metal, get good welds there. Then we're going to wire wheel and brush the whole area that we're covering up. Then once we get that done, we're going to actually spray it with a rust neutralizer, let that dry, and that's to convert some of this metal back to good metal, try to get rid of some of that rust. And then we're going to spray a weld through primer on here and let that dry. Once that's done, we're going to have to go back, do this same process again, put the plates up, mark out our perimeters, clean up the areas, because even though this says weld through, it doesn't really mean that you want to directly weld through it. You still want to have good clean metal to clean metal whenever you are welding. We're also going to take this weld through primer and paint the back sides or the inside of our plates before we do go install them. So that way you're not putting bare metal over top of this rust, which would just start rusting pretty quickly. Again, I mean, it will last quite a while, but we want to try to, you know, add to the longevity of this as much as possible. So this is a process that is probably going to take you a while, so don't speed through it. The more time you spend here prepping, the better and the easier everything will go whenever you start installing everything. Some additional tips on removing this undercoating. You can actually see where it was on here because it's bare metal now underneath. The undercoating, if you take a wire wheel directly to it without removing some of it, you're just going to spread it around. You're actually going to make a bigger mess than what you have. What you can do is take a scraper, scrape as much of it off as you can. Then you can start to try to take a wire wheel and get it off of there. You can also use strippers and different things on the undercoating. You'll really have to be careful, you know, wear some sort of mask or something as you're doing that, especially in an enclosed area underneath the vehicle, and then make sure you get it all off before you do any sort of welding. And, you know, as we do all of this, we actually recommend wearing a mask because this dust and everything gets all over the place and can really mess with you and make you sick. So definitely want to wear your PPE, but yeah, so this undercoating can actually be a massive pain in the butt if you're not careful. Now we're going to go ahead and start grinding a lot of this off and get all of this other area down to bare metal. Now we're getting ready to start welding our plates in. Just a couple things before we get there. If you are not an experienced welder, if you would not trust your life to your welds, your family's lives, definitely go and get an experienced welder for this. Also, you know, like I said, prep is key. If you haven't prepped the frame enough, you are going to end up with bad welds, and it could potentially cause issues further down the road. Now, getting to the kit, what we're going to do is we're going to start with this inside plate first. And this inside plate, what we've done is we try to go from crossmember to crossmember because we want to not only tie the frame into this plate, but also those two cross members. So that poses a little bit of a problem here at the front because this cross member is so large, you do end up with some gaps. So you're going to need a large C-clamp to close those gaps. And then what we use is we put a bolt and a nut through these holes with the slots in them, just like this one. We do that down here with this one, but on the back side, it's completely gone. So we put those nuts and bolts in there, and then we tighten it down to close up any of those gaps. You're still going to end up with a bit of a gap up here. You'll have to weld closed, and then you'll end up with these holes here, which will have a little bit of a gap in between them. Not much you can do about that, but because we really do want to tie, you know, this cross member in to this new kit instead of just relying on the old frame to the cross member. Now, then you're going to need, like I said, this big clamp here. May need a few clamps, and we're going to want to go in here and we'll probably put some heavy tacks across the top, some down in here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the outside and bottom plate because we're going to need that outside and bottom to also clamp this closed to start closing up any gaps. Really, you don't want gaps if at all possible, because they're going to be more difficult to fill than obviously a weld with no gap. Now, as for the welding on this, these frames, especially the area that is not reinforced by a cross member, are very thin. They're much thinner than like a Jeep frame. So you will have to watch your settings very closely. We will actually adjust our settings going from the welding over here to the welding in here to the welding back here to down here, because these Chevy frames are just not great. They're a lot thinner than a lot of other frames, which is part of the reason why they have so many issues. So anyway, another thing to make sure is there is a threaded hole right here that goes into the frame, and that holds that little bracket that holds your fuel lines once you're done. Make sure that you have clearance for that hole, which if you're lining up these, you should have clearance with no issue. So all that out of the way, let's start doing some welding. Now onto the outside plate. We're going to start here somewhat in the middle of where this flange comes across. We're clamping it in, and then we're also clamping it up, and we did that by basically putting this smaller clamp in this hole because we want to get this to a point to where it comes together at a nice corner to give us a place to put a nice fillet weld along here. And we'll have to go through here and do the same thing all the way across this. Now, from front to rear to line it up, you can use basically the body mount here to line it up. It should be right on the edge of the front side of this body mount. So we'll go ahead and we're going to tack it up here. We're going to go in, we're going to tack it here, and then we're going to move over to the rear, move to the front, do the same, and basically then work our way front and then start working our way towards the rear, because back here we have a little bit more play in moving these panels up and down to get them where we want them. If you have issues, you know, you want to hammer any gaps closed, don't be afraid to use the hammer, and if anything, if something's not lining up right, you may have to go in with the hard wheel, do a little bit of relief, get everything to line up correctly, and then go from there. Up here at the front, you're going to have the flange on the side, flange on the bottom, and you're going to have to get those closed. Now if you have a large enough clamp, you could clamp this up to bring this up, but in the end we're still going to have to close this gap up. So we don't have a large enough clamp actually to get up in there without making something special. What you can do is you can start back here at the back. We've put a decent weld here. Of course, it's secured up there. We're going to weld this up here and then start welding up on this, and then basically hammer this up and this in as we, you know, put tacks here, because the tacks will then hold it and keep it from moving and allow us to bend these pieces a little bit easier. So again, like I said, don't be afraid of the hammer. All right, similar to the front here, you're gonna have to do the same thing for this back edge. Unfortunately, right here, the frame does a little jog, so we couldn't make this one solid piece like that, so we gotta put the slit in here. So we hammered this over to where it rounded in, and then we hammered this up. You can use a bar, putting in one of these holes to help pull this up, and then we'll weld about an inch or so, hammer this in, hammer that up, and repeat on down the line through there. Also adding weld to the inside here. Now, if you are installing multiple kits, once you get back here to where this kit overlays the center kit, you will have a section here that the gap is a bit wider, but you are welding into solid material back here. So we'll basically place 2 welds along there, closing up the gaps. Once we get that done, we'll go through and basically just start solid welding all around the kit where we've got all of our stitch welds right now, and get everything solid welded. Then we'll come back and we'll show you the installation of the pieces that go around this body mount. All right, for these pieces, it's really pretty simple. They'll go right around here as such. Weld them solid all the way around. Weld them on both sides of this body mount. Now, we typically don't weld this inside seam right here of this plate, because usually this is filled with that undercoating, so you're going to get into that and it's going to be really hard to get a good weld. We do solid weld out here, but then that's part of the purpose of having these additional plates, is to tie this side into this side and on back through there. So we'll get that done, we'll do some cleanup, and then we'll come back and take a final look. All right, one last quick look, and we mainly painted the parts. We'll end up priming and painting more than what's just shown, but we mainly want to show you the areas that this kit does cover on the inside and the outside of the Chevy. All right, so that will do it for this install. If you are looking for one of these kits, you can find the link in the description for this video. You can also find them on taboocustoms.com, Amazon, eBay, and a couple of other areas. So be sure to check it out. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave a comment on this video, or you can reach us at dave@taboocustoms.com. And thank you for watching. As always, to like and subscribe is greatly appreciated.